I've joined the Rawvolution at Naturaw because I know that not all raw food is created equal. I'm passionate about feeding dogs as nature intended. After all, you are what you eat, and so is your dog. At Naturaw, there are no compromises, no confusion, just real raw food made with integrity and a conscience, offering 100% transparency, supporting British farmers, and only using the highest welfare assured ingredients is so important. They're a certified B Corp and reduce their carbon footprint by utilizing solar power and planting trees. They only use completely plastic-free packaging that's home compostable. Prudence and Mr. Binks are simply loving their nutrient-dense and balanced recipes. So try Naturaw today. Just go to naturaw.co.uk and grab 20% off your first purchase with my code AnnaWebb20. Join the Rawvolution and feed exceptional raw food. Hello, I'm Anna Webb, and welcome to this week's episode of A Dog's Life, which is powered by Antonol. I'm chatting to Gordon Maclellan, a retired orthopedic surgeon, about innate health in dogs. Gordon Maclellan, welcome back to A Dog's Life.
Thank you. It's very nice to be with you this morning.
I don't know what the weather's like with you, but it's pretty dismal, I think the word is, here in London.
Well, here in Cumbria, I have a high cloud, sunshine, lovely, pretty blue colours. And the fells of the Lake District are topped with snow as I look out on them from my window. And the Pennines are not topped with snow. So there's snow on the highest ground.
Gosh, that's amazing. I'm thinking about Wuthering Heights. Gordon, thank you for coming back onto the podcast, because our last episode where we discussed your Pupscan project really received a huge amount of interest, and your knowledge, as, indeed a retired orthopedic surgeon for humans. Is that right?
It is, absolutely, yes. And a lot of the work I did was pediatric. So the husbandry issue of looking after puppies is not that dissimilar to looking after children.
Yes, indeed. Although I do maintain that we mustn't think that our dogs are little people in a furry suit.
I agree with you absolutely. We have possibly even more responsibility than we think of for our children. I don't know. I've only been in the dog world in a major way for 10 years. But during that time, I've come to appreciate the immense knowledge held by expert dog breeders, and particularly those who breed purebred dogs. The immense trouble they go to make sure they're health tested and have all the possible advantages at the start of their lives they can get. I think there's been a bit of a downer on purebred dogs in recent years, and it's been based on entirely false statistical premise. And in human medicine, of course, if we started going around, for instance, you look at children with undescended testicles. It's the commonest operation done by pediatric urological surgeons these days, is bringing down an undescended testis to the scrotum. But in the dog world, firstly, they remove it rather than bringing it down. And some vets even advocate removing the perfectly healthy testis that may be in the scrotum, just so you can't breed from the dog. But there's no evidence from all the veterinary research that undescended testicles is, for instance, a genetic disorder. So there's a lot to be said for interlinking veterinary and human medicine, because we can both learn from each other a tremendous amount.
Well, that is so interesting that you say that, because, of course, there is a big wave of interest in this One Health perspective.
Yes, and of course, when I was growing up as a young surgeon, we did a lot of work with the vets doing research with animals. I was involved in research on Perthes disease in beagle dogs, for example,
I
which has
love
been,
that. Oh, Gordon, please let me interject, because you know my little Mr. Binks. He's got
yes,
Perthes disease. I managed to not, I mean, I have no regrets. I managed to rehome, a dog with Perthes disease, as the breeder didn't actually tell me he had it, and was missing a hip. So Perthes, I think perhaps it's more common than we think. Gordon, what do you think?
well, I think that there are certain breeds of dog that have been linked with Perthes disease. And there's a famous one in the literature about one particular terrier. And they thought that in that case, it was down to an abnormality of the blood supply. There's been a lot of talk about outcrossing dogs recently. And what I learned only a few weeks ago when I was at a dog show, talking to somebody who has another breed of dog which was crossed. It's in essence a crossbreed from about 150 years ago, from the breed that has this anomaly of the blood supply to the top end of the thigh bone, with another breed. And this new breed, well, it's 150 years old now, but this breed has also a tendency to Perthes disease. And more importantly, we've got the entire family history, because it's a pedigree dog now, and they have the whole pedigree history of this dog. And the owner of the dog knows all the relatives that are also affected with Perthes disease. And this is why, if you've got a bad hip in an adult dog, you must make the diagnosis. Just saying it's dysplastic is utterly meaningless. It just says it's not normal. Dysplastic means faulty development. It is not a diagnosis, and it's nothing on which you base a decision about breeding or not breeding from your dog. Most dysplasia of the hip is due to trauma. And in puppies, it happens so easily. If a puppy's overweight, we know they get hip problems. If a puppy is running around on slippery floors, they get hip problems as well as elbow problems. If they jump from a height, they may break their elbow joints or part of it and cause an anconeus fracture. That's not elbow dysplasia. It's an unhealed fracture. And what's more, it says so in the veterinary textbooks. So there's no great mystery about all this. The essence of all preventive medicine when it comes to genetics is to be absolutely certain that you're dealing with a genetic abnormality. There's at least a dozen things causing hip dysplasia. There's no possibility that just giving it a generic number, for instance, is actually going to solve anything. And in 40 years, of current practice, it hasn't done. There's not a single breed of dog that has had the instance of hip dysplasia reduced by the investigations that have been carried out worldwide for hip dysplasia using that very generic term. You must make the diagnosis. And the same applies to obstructive airways disease in dogs, which they're blaming on brachycephalic dogs. Yes, they've got a short muzzle, but if you go into hospital and you're terribly ill and you've got pneumonia, you'll have a tracheostomy done to make the airway even shorter, if you possibly can, because that leaves less dead space. A short airway is an efficient one. And if you look at humans, as the sort of one of the biggest brachycephalic species on the planet, they have perfectly adequate airways, provided the internal structure of the air passages is normal. Some people have a crooked septum. Some people get allergies all the time and the soft lining of the airway swells up. Some people get a virus infection called the common cold and their nose gets blocked and they have airway problems. Dogs are exactly the same. They have all the problems humans have. I don't think they got fewer and I don't think they got more. I think they got the same ones. But dogs have to live in the human environment that we've created for them, all the toxins flying around and all the pollutants that they have to live with, often at a much higher concentration than we do because they're nearer the floor. things like air fresheners, scented candles, releasing all sorts of hydrocarbons, some of which are known to be toxic. So before you go rushing off saying that all brachycephalic dogs are inherently unhealthy, it is not true.
So interesting, because the rise in the popularity of the brachycephalic breeds is causing a lot of hoo-ha, but you often see that these breeds, you know, how to put it politely, they're a bit porky. And I think there's this kind of self-fulfilling situation where, because, for example, say a pug, a delightful dog, I mean, delightful, so much fun. You know, they're pugnacious, they've got the greatest personalities, but you rarely see a slim one. What would you say, Gordon?
Yes, I mean, my oldest friend had pugs. His mother had pugs, and she'd had pugs for over 50 years. I never saw an unhealthy one. And in fact, my favorite, I suppose, of John's pugs was called Harry. And Harry used to go out shooting with them in the pheasant season, because he would go out all day flushing pheasants from the fields of kale. He would run along underneath the branches of the kale plants, and you just see a little rustling of the kale plant where Harry was. And shortly afterwards, a pheasant would flush up. And, you know, Harry would do that all day, fit as a fiddle. And he was a brachycephalic pug, slim, healthy, outdoor lifestyle in the country all the time. Wonderful dog and a great companion.
Oh, you see, this is great. And interestingly, only last week, actually, I had the actual pure joy of going down to a place called Cuppa Pug, where you actually have a cuppa with a pug. It is a pug cafe. It's actually all about rescuing and rehoming pugs, actually. That the guys that run it are, you know, extremely informed and passionate, and it's an educational place to go. Also, it's lots of fun, but it's a lovely way of meeting a pug, deciding if actually a pug is the dog that you'd like to bring home before you do, you know. So it's a wonderful educational place, and the pugs are, guess what, really slim. I mean, they actually live somewhere in Suffolk, close to a beach, and the pugs run on the beach regularly, and they're all fit as a fiddle. You know, they could jump higher than you could possibly imagine, higher than a cat of the same size. Actually, they were really fun little things, and that was interesting. There was no snorting. It's the first time I've been around 15 pugs all at the same time, you know, because I haven't had that pleasure before. The remarkable thing was none of them were huffing and puffing and panting. None of them were overweight. They were great fun. They were loving the interest in the company. The treats that you were asked to give them was actually thinly sliced raw carrot, which I loved, because that's obviously a lot less calorific than many of the treats on the market these days. And they were full of beans. Honestly, Gordon, it was a heavenly experience.
Yes, and that is the general experience of a well-bred, well-looked-after dog. And to say that there is an innate health problem with any breed of dog is fundamentally wrong. I understand vets who see an awful lot of a particular breed with a problem will get the impression that it's disproportionate. For instance, they used to think that the Labrador was very prone to hip dysplasia. Well, there were more Labradors than any other breed in the country. So the vets stand to reason to see more Labradors than any other dog. And so when they're going to see faulty hips, they'll see them more often in Labradors than anything else. 25 years ago, the same thing was true of German Shepherd dogs, etc. But we know that from our scan results, as I probably said last time, we still haven't, in all the dozens of Labrador puppies we've scanned, when we scan the entire litter, so we're not pre-selecting anything, in none of them has there been a hint of faulty development of the hip joint, and likewise with the German Shepherds. But what we have found is evidence of injuries to the growing parts of the hip joint in the ones on slippery floors. And that's why husbandry is what matters here. You've got to keep the dog healthy, slim, on non-slip surfaces, not taking it out for a 5 kilometer run at the age of 6 months or whatever, just to give it some exercise. These sort of things that are in all the books. Everybody tells you how to look after your dog. It's probably in your puppy contract when you buy your dog, how much exercise to give it. And people think they know better. Well, the thing is, growing dogs, just like growing children, get injured. They get injured at the growth plates. And once you get a deformity in the growth plate, you're set up for arthritis later on in life. And it's so straightforward. If you think, would I do this to my child? Would I let my 2-year-old child run downstairs? Well, if you wouldn't, then don't let your 6-month-old puppy run downstairs.
Yes.
It's simple.
It is. Yes, absolutely. But I think a lot of people, I don't know, I don't know at the moment. The landscape of dogs, Gordon, has shifted really dramatically. And in a very short period of time, when you think of the 30,000 years or so that we've been living with dogs, it's been really in the last 20 that things have totally shifted beyond belief, with, lots of opinions flying around here, there, and everywhere. There's a big investigation going on at the moment with the veterinary profession, which is remarkable in itself, really. What I wanted to pick up on what you just said, this whole link to disease prevention and the environment. Could you not say, okay, yes, with joint conditions, we can visualize that because, yes, you go for a long run, you pull a muscle, that's going to affect the joint. Humans do that every day. But what about deeper disease like cancer? I know it's a big subject, but is this a similar interrelationship, do you think, between the environment and general husbandry?
Well, I do think it's important to recognize that the people researching cancer have identified all sorts of chemicals that we may be eating or drinking, which are statistically correlated with some cancers, not all cancers, but some cancers. And again, coming back to the undescended testicles, you look at the dogs who are exposed to either chemicals called anti-androgens, they are, which is basically like an estrogen. There's estrogens in our drinking water, but how much there is in your drinking water depends where you live. And so you can ask your water company how much estrogen you've got in your drinking water. And if you don't want your bitch exposed to estrogen when she's expecting a litter, then you just get a water filter with a charcoal filter in it and filter their water, and that'll get rid of most of these impurities and chemicals, so that at least you're giving them healthy things that are free of the toxins of our environment, at least to the best of your ability. You can't do more than that. And a lot of friends of mine who breed dogs have been doing this for several years now. And the thing is, the same chemicals, they're called phthalates. They're part of the way plastics are made, so that plastics are a little bit pliable while retaining their strength. These phthalates break down from the surface of some plastics and end up in water or in food and so on. And phthalates have been linked with some kinds of cancer as well.
Yes.
So we can immunize our dogs to our environment a little bit by just bearing in mind that some of the environmental toxins that we have created as humans damage dogs as much as they damage humans.
Yes, it's very interesting. Another thing for me is synthetic fibers. Actually, I like to sort of, one of my sofas is definitely filled with horsehair, actually, and it's a proper old drop arm Victorian sofa that I spent an absolute fortune on restoring, only for the cats I've had so far to totally destroy it again, as they like to use it as a scratching post. But listen, I don't mind, because my casa is their casa and it adds to the character of this sofa.
Yes.
But I know I'm so silly, and the drop arm functions currently currently broken. I've got to get it fixed. So it's currently a chaise longue, but it's a nice little sofa, and it's worth some money actually, but I digress. Simply going to a charity shop, going through, a big bucket of old fabrics, finding something that's a natural fabric that you can use as a big throw over some furniture that tends to have this thing in it called foam. And foam can be full of toxins, I think. Anyway, Gordon, what do you think?
Some foams are. For instance, to get the polymerization process going often requires a catalyst. And some catalysts are toxic. I can think of one very important polymer that we all use if you wear running shoes and things like that. And the catalyst to get that going was a mercury compound. And fortunately, it's not the sort of material you would ever end up eating, but it is there. And dogs chew shoes and soles and things like that. And they treat them as toys, but actually there may be toxins in them. So what you give your dog to play with, you need to make sure that it doesn't contain any chemicals that might actually be toxic to them.
Yes, there's very much so, particularly, you want everything BPA free. I think there's been a lot of studies actually on children, eating out of plastic bowls or using plastic bottles. And there's science on that to basically indicate, you have to be very careful where plastics are concerned, But, it's all about inhaling these things because, as you were saying earlier, it's all about volatile organic compounds that get triggered generally when you turn the heating on, for example. And, a floor cleaner, for example, it can still be exuding these compounds up into the air that then, of course, get inhaled by the dog, and by humans, obviously, as well. But as you say,
the dog is a lot closer to the floor than we are.
Yes, no, exactly.
Especially if you're thinking of a dog like a pug or a Pekingese or a French bulldog or whatever. Their noses are very close to the floor all the time. And so you need to keep these things in the back of your mind. Before you rush off and blame genetics, think first of the environment. I don't know if you've ever seen a book called Control of Canine Genetic Diseases. Have you, Anna?
I haven't actually. I've got an extensive dog library, I must say, but no, I haven't on that one.
This is a book that was published 20 odd years ago now. Oh, golly, make cracky. I'm thinking, all right, 30 years ago nearly. Professor Paget was a professor in the United States. He wrote this wonderful book on the control of canine genetic diseases. And he makes the point right at the very, very beginning of the book of think of all the other diagnoses that may be responsible for the abnormality before you blame genetics. And then he goes on to talk about the genetics. But that rule is exactly the same in human medicine. And I'm sure vets in veterinary school are taught the same rule. But somehow the current trend for talking about generic things like brachycephalic obstructive airways disease, it just completely separates you away from the realities that we've discovered with hip disease or elbow disease. The reality is that the airway can be affected anywhere from the tip of the nostril right the way down to the alveoli of the lung. And it's nothing whatever to do with the length of the muzzle unless the internal structure of the airway is deformed, such as like a crooked septum, which I used to have, or if you've got swollen tonsils or adenoids and things like that, which I used to have. As a boy, I had my adenoids removed because of that, because I couldn't breathe properly. Well, guess what? Dogs get the same problems. And so I would like vets just to bear in mind the same rules that Paget was teaching in that book and has been taught by doctors going all the way back to John Hunter 250 plus years ago, when he set up the London Veterinary School. It's the same John Hunter who worked at St. George's Hospital, and it was the origins of the Hunterian Museum, which you can see at the Royal College of Surgeons, well worth a visit. Anyway, the same John Hunter had a menagerie. He did a lot of comparative anatomy work, and he had a farm out at Earl's Court when it was still farmland, and he had all these different animals there. And he used to do dissections on them when they died, and so on. So he got to learn human anatomy and the details of how everything worked from studying animals. Well, remarkable man, is the wheel is being rediscovered all these years later, that humans and animals are really fundamentally very similar indeed.
Yes, so interesting. But this is, I mean, gosh, we could talk for ages on this. And it's interesting. I know a bulldog, sadly she's not with us anymore, but Matilda was her name, lived till she was 13, but she did undergo a surgery to broaden her nostrils that were quite small holes, if you like. So
yes,
but that
was she bred from, Anna? Did anybody breed from her?
No.
Well,
No.
there you are, you see. So you've got a responsible breeder who looks at a dog that's got an obvious problem and doesn't breed from it. And you look at your purebred dog breeders in this country that are breeding for the love of the dog and so on, and not just breeding to make money. And they will make sure that they don't breed on unsatisfactory, unhealthy examples of the dog. So if you look at the English Bulldog, for instance, 25 odd years ago, the chairman of the old English Bulldog Society decided they would get rid of narrow nostril dogs and not breed from them and not exhibit them in dog shows. And within about 7 years, they pretty well got rid of the problem. And so that was done as the initiative of the breed health coordinator for the English Bulldog. If the breed health coordinators for pugs and French bulldogs and all the other dogs that are being blamed in brachycephalic obstructive airways disease, if those breed health coordinators took the same policy and the Kennel Club judges didn't promote dogs that had excessively flat faces or that appeared to have respiratory problems, if they were never advanced up the show scale, as it were, and end up in places like Crufts, those judges can get rid of these problems.
Yes,
should do.
It's interesting, but you mentioned the Kennel Club there. I mean, with the Animal Health Trust over the years, the Kennel Club has invested millions into tests to diagnose for other things. For example, with miniature bull terriers for years. In fact, when it was happening, when I took Molly into my life in 2002, there was a risk, and I had to take it on board, that she might go blind, with primary lens luxation, which was a big genetic issue in the breed until I think it wasn't until about 2011, even 12, that they found a genetic test, so that was reliable. So basically the parents could be tested. So then the breeders selected the dogs that could be bred together, like you were saying about the nostrils there, and eliminate the chance of getting PLL. So it was with confidence that I was able to. Molly never went blind, actually, so she was lucky, but about 1 in 3 in a litter would go blind, and you weren't able to know which one it was going to be, But then with confidence in 2015, I think the test must have come in actually about 2010, because by 2015, when I brought Prudence into my life, I knew for sure she wasn't going to go blind. So, that's a big thing also, and just in a different kind of disease.
But Anna, it's an example of where the vet made a diagnosis. They identified what was wrong, and then they, having identified precisely what was wrong, they knew what to do about it. But when you're talking about these very generic labels like obstructive airways disease, when the mischief can be anywhere over a distance of about a foot, or hip or elbow dysplasia, which are just generic descriptions of something being wrong, there isn't the remotest chance you're going to even identify the right genes unless you make a much more coherent diagnosis that's evidence-based, validated, backed up by science, something you can see under the microscope, or see on a CT scan or whatever. You need that level of evidence to say exactly what's happened. And that's where we want to see vets go back to making a diagnosis and not talking in these generic terms that really don't help you prevent these problems in the longer term. And thank goodness your vet sorted out the eye problems and did the appropriate genetic test, having singled out a specific abnormality in the eye. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they did think that PLL was an inherited disease, though. So are you, I mean, and it was, a scourge across the breed, if you like, and it
Yes,
was a massive
absolutely. And
risk.
that's why, this is why, I say that, we have to be very responsible. In some ways more responsible perhaps for animals than we are for humans, because we can be bringing animals into people's lives and selling them to them as puppies, and be unaware that you're selling somebody a dog that's going to have huge vet bills over the next 10 years or so, and end up blind and making life incredibly difficult for you, if the breeder hasn't identified those problems and hasn't done the genetic tests. And this is what the Kennel Club used to do very well indeed. They got genetic tests where they could be done and promoted them throughout the breed and in related breeds, and go hunting that way. You can't do that if you don't have the pedigree of the dog. And the Kennel Club has those pedigrees going back years, or generations, I should say. And that's what you need if you really want to make a dent in this.
Hey, Anna.
Hey, Mike.
So we've just finished Billy's first 60 days of Antinol, and wow, what a difference.
Really? Oh my gosh, what have you noticed?
Well, he's shiner. He's much more energetic. Not that he wasn't beforehand, but you can see the difference. But remember, I told you he used to have that little limp in his back left paw that he'd hurt himself when he was a pup. But he
Yes,
doesn't seem
yes.
to do that much anymore.
What, the hop, skip, and the jump?
Yeah, yeah. So it's like his joints are a bit better. And we actually had friends around this weekend who'd noticed that there was something good about Billy. And I was telling them about Antinol, and they said, "Oh, what's in it?" I said, "Well, green lip muscle." And they said, "What's that?" And I go, "Oh, well, I don't know. I'll have to ask Anna," as I always do. So
Well,
for next
green,
time, what should I say? What's so great
well,
about green lip muscle?
well, green lip mussel, it comes from New Zealand. It's the only place that green lip mussels live. And what's great about the green lip mussel is that it is what's known as a broad spectrum source of omega-3. And the reason dogs need to take omega-3 is that their bodies don't make it themselves. So unless they're getting it through, their diet, which can be omega-6 heavy. And it's very important to have a balance between omega-6 and omega-3. So it's normally through supplements that omega-3 is given. And green lip mussel is unique in its having everything from EPA, DHA, and ETA. So all the main omega-3s.
And how about Binks and Prudence? They must be much better as well.
Yeah, well, they've been on it for over a year, and they've been on green lip mussel forever since I've had them. So Prue's 10 now. So she's had green lip mussel since the first day I brought her home, to be honest, but not Antinol. And I only wish I'd discovered Antinol earlier. I really honestly mean that, because it's an oil rather than a powder. So its bioavailability, that means, its effectivity to get absorbed quickly and efficiently by the body is greater.
So people listening now and they want to discover Antinol for themselves, where do they go?
Well, all you have to do is go to Antinol, ANTINOL.co.uk, and then type in Anna Webb and get your special discount. The other thing, though, that I find a bit worrying, only because I am very partial to Griffon Bruxellois, the little Griffons.
Yes.
I do love them. My aunt, many, many years ago, had a little Griffon, and mind you, she was absolutely brilliant, definitely very alive and very well. And she could jump on the table and she'd do this little dance. Honestly, I absolutely loved this little dog, and she had quite a snout, but compared to some now. However, but what causes them problems as well, and we shouldn't go into this too much, this is another big conversation I'm about to throw at you, Gordon, but it's syringiomelia. Because Griffons get syringiomelia, you see, which is absolutely ghastly and dreadful. But so do so many breeds like Cavaliers. And I don't know if there's a test for that now. A lot of that apparently got ingrained in certain breeds, down to breeding too soon from dogs, because the symptoms of this would appear, at about the age of 5, by which time some dogs would have been bred from. So there is all of that, which it's such a nasty one. Well, it's all nasty. I mean, nobody wants their dog to be ill. No one wants dogs to suffer. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, of course. But syringomyelia is a very specific diagnosis. And, when you're screening out a given specific diagnosis like that, that's marvelous. And that's what vets have done so well for so many years now, certainly in the years since they've had diagnostic imaging and things like that, which really only began in the veterinary world after the Second World War. If you go back before the Second World War, most vets didn't have X-ray equipment available to them. They didn't have things like ultrasound, for example. And many vets still don't use ultrasound for musculoskeletal problems. There was a course a few years ago at the Royal Veterinary College teaching musculoskeletal ultrasound. But until we did our huge study on hip dysplasia, there was very little data out there in the veterinary literature about what a normal puppy hip looks like. And now, of course, we've got literally hundreds and hundreds of scans from some breeds. Labradors we pursued vigorously because of the importance of them in terms of guide dogs and so on. So we wanted to be as certain as we possibly could that they didn't have any inherited tendency to hip dysplasia. And I'm so pleased that we now know that they haven't. But until you do these sort of studies, prospectively, without pre-selection, you're not really going to have a handle on it. And syringomyelia is a difficult one because on X-ray, it's very difficult to diagnose other than with something like a CT scan. And you've got to put a dog to sleep for a CT scan. And that's a big commitment as well as being very expensive. So, yeah, this needs to be sorted out, obviously. And the Cavalier, King Charles, or and other dogs that are related and may carry the same genes can be tracked down through their family history, or pedigree, as we call it. And hopefully one day we'll get to the stem that produced all these and eliminate it.
Yes. And that's it, breeding from health tested dogs, this is, and, I'm like you, Gordon, I've been going to Crufts since I was 8, actually, and I absolutely love all the breeds. I do actually one day want to go on Mastermind, actually, so I'll nail it, generally on dogs, actually, because, the sort of, knowledge that's in my head is something I'm actually really proud of, Gordon. And dogs do enrich our lives so much, and it's so heartbreaking when they get ill and there's nothing that can be done, kind of thing. You get to that point, and really, yes, it's something that if everyone can work together, it will make people's lives much happier. And we need pedigree dogs. I really believe that. People go, oh, Anna, all dogs are amazing. Yes, I work with lots of designer crossbreeds, and they're all brilliant. But the thing is, it's our history as well. It's the history of humans that is mirrored by so many different breeds of dogs. Would you agree?
Absolutely agree with you. Yeah. And I tell you what, I know you watched the Panorama program that was aired recently on the veterinary studies. And one of the things that struck me in there is that somebody made the comment that pets are being seen as a luxury item. Oh. My goodness me, they're not. They're such an integral part of so many millions of people's mental health that to think of a pet as a luxury item is the most appalling thing. And I think they need a lot more respect than that, a lot more.
Absolutely. The end comment of that Panorama documentary, which I think everyone should watch. It's only half an hour. It's on iPlayer. Is the end comment. I just, it threw me back actually into my sofa that's been trashed by my cat. And I just thought, gosh, that's all I thought, really. And I was
What was the end comment?
Oh gosh. Oh yeah. The end comment was when the reporter asked the vet, who did seem really lovely, actually, in fairness, said, so do you think soon that only rich people will be able to own dogs. To which the vet, passionately spoke actually and said, I just really hope not.
Good, good. Yeah, I mean, it is so important. And we do recognize how important dogs are to their owners. And bereavement of a dog is every bit as significant to some people as bereavement of a family member. It's a very genuine thing when you lose a pet. It's a big deal. And folks should be treated with respect when they're in that situation.
Oh, totally. Funnily enough, I was on Jeremy Vine only last Friday, I think it was, or Thursday, talking about, should bereavement leave for a pet become statutory? So obviously I argued definitely that it should. It was quite a feisty debate. I think I won it.
Well, I think the thing is people need to respect folk who've lost a much loved pet that may have been with them for many years. And that's why looking after the animal's health is so important. It matters to us. It really matters to us as individuals. Whatever it is, 10 million households have got a pet, probably more a dog, let alone a pet. And whether it's a goldfish or a hamster or whatever, I mean, we learn to look after other animals. Philosophically, do humans have dominion over the animals? I don't know, but I said, tell you what, we have a responsibility to them. And for a very long time, we haven't discharged that responsibility very honorably. And I think the tide must change. We've got to get vets back to making a diagnosis, giving them all the help they can possibly get to make a diagnosis, and then come up with a plan of management for something that's gone wrong that is affordable and manageable and consistent, really, with the animal's life and well-being. I think at the moment I saw that little comment about £10,000 for a hip replacement. Well, a human can get a hip replacement for £10,000. Why does a dog need a hip replacement? You mentioned the dog who had Perthes disease and had the femoral head removed.
Yeah, he hasn't had it. I mean, he's 14 in 3 weeks, and touch wood, he's grand, really.
Yes.
He's never been ill. I mean, he's actually he had a couple of dentals. That's it. Actually, that's it. Touch wood. He uses his back leg. It's great. I do massage, I do physiotherapy, I do red light therapy on it. I haven't just thought, oh, he's only got one hip. We've done a huge amount of acupuncture through his life, some more acupuncture and all of these things than most dogs will have. But that's because I had, if you like, in inverted commas, the diagnosis to him carrying his leg wasn't that he was overwalked as a puppy. Bit naughty to have said that. I still would have taken him, but it has meant, of course, that he's been uninsurable all these years. But honestly, he's had my 110% commitment nevertheless. And this obviously was why nobody wanted him. But I always like to champion an underdog, and I'm so proud to have brought him back to life and rehabilitated him, Mr. Binks. And he's done some great things. And Kay Burley at Sky News loves his ears.
Well, when I started out as a doctor back in the 1960s, the operation of total hip replacement wasn't being done. It was before Charnley and others really pushed it into the general world of orthopedics. In those days, it was a great rarity, and removing the femoral head, as has happened for your dog, was actually a fairly common operation. And it was popularized by a professor in Oxford who had some very good results with this, but people never got off a walking stick because we all walk on two legs and the mechanics of it are so inefficient. But for a dog, you can have a painless joint carrying 25% of the weight, as it were, and going through life quite happily. You see lots of dogs who've had legs amputated and get on through life on the three legs perfectly well.
Yes,
depending a little bit on the breed. So you can spend too much money on these things in a way that is not really thought through. And until the evidence that these treatments are better than the alternatives emerges, then I think we need to be a little bit careful about dishing out £10,000 for an operation that has complications.
Well, all surgeries
so
do, don't they, Gordon? I mean,
yes.
anesthetic is not a benign procedure. You know, you take your dog to the edge of death and hope.
I hope not quite. Not quite.
Is it not quite? Oh gosh, I'm terrible, aren't I?
I hope not. But
well, they're
for instance,
you know,
I came across a lady who had a particular breed of dog that needed to have these hip scores done, and she lost 2 of her breeding stock under anaesthetic.
Well, this is what I mean. It can happen, and you have to.
Yes, it can happen.
The bit I hate
risks
about
need to be identified and measured and published. Published.
Yes,
there are no published complications of any of these procedures available to the general public, and it's all well and good vets. And I think it's entirely desirable that, as far as possible, vets give an idea of how much a procedure or a treatment's going to cost. But they also need to have some inkling of what the outcome's likely to be.
Sure. And the side effects.
The alternatives. Our vet does. She discusses all the alternatives with us. So, most vets do.
It's just interesting. I did all my study with the College of Integrated Veterinary Therapies, which was 3 years. Absolutely loved it. And to help save Molly, my first miniature bull terrier's life, which I did, I kept her going for 5 more years. Anyway, the thing so now, an anesthetic is thrown into a conversation, which doesn't really happen at all, actually, anymore. I will say, yes, but what about the oxidative stress? And at that point, a different conversation starts to happen. So, but nobody tells you about the oxidative stress that this procedure will definitely 110% have on your dog. So that has to be factored in. I feel that's a very important point.
Yes, I think in human medicine, if you're doing big operations, you've got an anaesthetist there all the time, monitoring your vital signs, including oxygen levels, pulse rates, and so on. That's constantly under monitor from a very experienced doctor, and they will keep an eye on you while you're on the edge of viability of life, and make sure you come out the other end safe and sound. But there's an awful lot of. How often do vets, for instance, use epidural anesthetic in dogs as opposed to general anesthetics?
Oh, gosh. Gordon, I think we're going into a whole realm here now where,
absolutely. But this is where veterinary research will be evidence-based, and proper studies will be done, the results will be published, and people will then be able to make a decision based on facts, rather than impressions and incomplete information. The more information that's out there, not just the information on cost, but the information on complications and deaths and things like that, need to have numbers attached to them so people know just what the risks are, as well as the benefits.
Yes.
That's really important.
Oh, gosh, Gordon, you're so right. I mean, that is the mantra, risk to benefit. And it's a tricky one, it is a tricky one. But, oh gosh, Gordon, I've loved this conversation so much. And I really hope that you would like to come back in the not too distant future at all to chat some more about everything.
Thank you. It's nice to have the invitation. And I'm very pleased to be able to help sort of put a bit of flesh on the bones when it comes to 50 plus years of human medicine experience. And it's been quite a journey in human medicine, going from an era when we just had x-rays to make a diagnosis to when you've got CT scans and PET scans and ultrasound scans and all these wonderful diagnostic tools that have transformed human medicine, and watch it coming along a few years behind in the veterinary world. And I just think the bond between doctors and vets need to be a lot closer, because we've so much to learn from veterinary experience, and they've probably got a bit they can learn from us, because we've made our mistakes in human medicine. My goodness, we have over the years. Everything sort of from eating down to vaccinations and things. my medical school, St. George's, is where vaccination began. And on the wall of the library was the skin of the first cow that was used for vaccination by Edward Jenner all those hundreds of years ago. So I'm very passionate about vaccination and the rights and wrongs.
Oh gosh, well that's the topic for our next conversation. Because we've got to wrap now, but basically it was vaccinations that made me study with the College of Integrated Veterinary Therapies. So that was really
Oh, well.
Yes.
You'll know a lot more about it than I do then. Anna.
Well, I don't know about that, but all I know is you read the WSAVA vaccination guidelines.
Okay.
But Gordon, thank you again. Absolutely loving it. And I really do hope we're going to meet at Crufts this year.
I hope I'll get there. It depends if one of ours gets through to a group and gets through to Best in Show. Who knows?
You've got Malinois, haven't you?
No, we've got Taverns and Groenendael, Belgian Shepherd dogs, and they'll be coming down. Well, one of each, maybe two of one of them. Don't know, not sure yet. But yes, we'll be there on Thursday.
On
Thursday, the pastoral breeds. Whether I'll be able to get there or I'll be looking after the dogs left at home, I don't know yet.
Okay, well, keep me posted because that might definitely influence which day I go to Crufts. So thank you so much, Gordon.
All right, Anna, it's been a great pleasure.
That's our show, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go on, please rate and review the show. We do love to get the comments. Thanks again, of course, to Gordon Maclellan for joining us today. And thanks to Mike Hanson, my producer, for all the music and production as ever. And if you're interested in finding out more about Antinol, why not just go to their website, and at checkout, you can use my special code, which is Webb. Also, this episode, I'm proud to say, is fueled by Natu-Raw. Similarly, at checkout, just put in Webb20. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Then you'll never miss another show. Bye for now.